If you lived during the time of the Inquisition, you wouldn't survive a single day. Not because you were weak, not because you lacked courage, but because every breath, every glance, every stray word could doom you. A neighbor's whisper, a priest's suspicion, a jealous rival's accusation, anything could brand you a heretic. And once that happened, truth no longer mattered, only pain, fear, and confession did. In this story, you'll follow Matteo di Verona, a quiet parchment maker who never sought trouble. But in the brutal world of the Inquisition, trouble doesn't need to be sought, it finds you. When a passing remark is overheard in the wrong place, Matteo's peaceful life collapses in a single night. He is hunted not for what he did, but for what someone claims he said. You will see how ordinary people survived under constant fear. How accusations were born from envy, spite, or pure misunderstanding. How the Inquisition manipulated faith to control entire cities. How torture was used not to find truth, but to create it. This is a world where silence is safety, obedience is survival, and anything else is death. And you? If you were there, with your modern habits of questioning, doubting, thinking aloud, you wouldn't last until sunset. Hello. Welcome to my channel. Before we start, it's a good idea to go to bed and relax. I also want to ask you to subscribe to my channel, like it and write in the comments where you are from and what time it is. Using the link in the description you can support me. Thank you. Sweet dreams. The bell of San Felice rang low and heavy, rolling across the morning fog like a warning. Matteo di Verona lifted his head from the parchment he was scraping, the fine dust of dried lime still clinging to his fingertips. He had heard this bell his entire life, but today it sounded different, slower, as if the city itself hesitated to begin the day. Bad omen, murmured old Serafina, the herbalist who rented the corner stall beside his workshop. She crossed herself 3 times, her hands trembling. The bell rings like this only when someone has been taken. Matteo forced a smile. Probably just a funeral. Serafina stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. No. This is the Inquisition's bell. He felt a chill, but said nothing. Words were dangerous. Serafina, however, never understood when to stop. They took a baker's wife last week, she whispered. Said she muttered a prayer wrong. Wrong. As if any of us knows the exact order of the Latin chants, she paused, then leaned closer. They say she screamed for hours. Matteo's heart clenched. Not because of the story, though it was horrible, but because a city guard was passing just behind them, and Serafina never lowered her voice. The guard glanced briefly their way, then continued walking. Matteo let out the breath he had been holding. Please, he whispered sharply. Do not say such things where anyone can hear. But it was too late. The guard stopped. He turned slowly, his iron boots scraping the cobblestones. What was that? He asked. Serafina froze, her lips parted in terror. Matteo stepped forward quickly. Just a misunderstanding, sir. She is old Anne. I wasn't speaking to her, the guard interrupted. His eyes fixed on Matteo. What did you just say? Fog thickened the air. A drop of sweat slid down Matteo's back. One wrong sentence could change his life forever. He lowered his gaze. Nothing improper, sir. Only that people should be careful with their words in fearful times. The guard studied him. Too long. Far too long. Finally he nodded. See that you remember your own advice. Then he walked on. Matteo exhaled shakily. Serafina grabbed his arm. You saved me, she whispered. But Matteo didn't feel saved. Because across the street, under the stone archway of the old well, a man in dark robes had been watching them the entire time. His hood concealed most of his face, but Matteo saw the glint of an iron cross hanging from the man's belt. The mark of the Dominican Inquisitors. The robed figure turned and disappeared into the mist. And in that moment Matteo knew. He had been noticed. Maybe not accused. Maybe not yet. But noticed, and that alone could be fatal. He returned to his workshop, but his hands trembled too much to hold the knife properly. Every sound outside seemed louder. Every footstep felt like someone coming for him. By noon, even the scratching of parchment against stone made him flinch. Because in the time of the Inquisition, fear did not arrive with a shout. It arrived with a whisper. And Matteo had already spoken one word too many. Matteo tried to work through the afternoon, but the rhythm of his craft, scrape, smooth, rinse, stretch, no longer calmed him. His thoughts pulsed too loudly. Every time he glanced toward the door, he half expected to see the black-robed figure standing there, waiting. By the time the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, the fog had thickened into a heavy veil that muted all sound. Even the lively chatter of the marketplace had gone quiet. People hurried home early whenever the Inquisition was seen walking the streets. Matteo locked his workshop and began the walk toward his small rented room. The path wound between narrow stone alleys, dripping with moisture. He kept his hood up and his head down, hoping to blend into the evening gloom. But footsteps echoed behind him. Slow. Even. Purposeful. Matteo quickened his pace. The steps behind him matched his speed. He turned left, then right, weaving through the maze of alleys. The footsteps continued, always the same distance behind. Never closer, never farther. At the end of the lane, he reached the old bridge that crossed a shallow canal. A lantern flickered weakly on the stone railing, its flame struggling against the mist. Matteo stopped. So did the footsteps. He turned around. A figure emerged from the fog, the same dark robe, the same iron cross glinting beneath the lantern light. The Inquisitor's face remained mostly hidden, only the lower half visible, pale lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. "Good evening, Matteo di Verona," the man said. Hearing his name made Matteo's stomach drop. "Good evening, Father." The Inquisitor stepped closer, boots silent on the damp stones. "You spoke today in the marketplace. About fear. About people needing to watch their words." "I meant no disrespect," Matteo replied quickly. "Only that rumors cause panic. And panic invites harm." The Inquisitor tilted his head slightly. "A wise observation." Matteo blinked. He had expected suspicion, interrogation, not agreement. But, the Inquisitor continued softly, "Wisdom spoken too loudly can be mistaken for defiance." Matteo's blood ran cold. The Inquisitor reached into his robe. Matteo flinched, expecting shackles, a summons, anything. Instead, the man produced a folded piece of parchment. He held it out. A warning. Matteo hesitated before taking it. The parchment was sealed with red wax pressed by a ring marked with a cross and sword, the symbol of the Holy Office. "What is this?" "A list," the Inquisitor said. "Names of those already under observation. Names whispered in confessionals, reported by neighbors, suspected of unorthodox ideas." Matteo's hands trembled as he opened the parchment. He scanned the list. His vision blurred. There, halfway down, was a name he knew too well. Serafina di Lume. He looked up in horror. "She is just an herbalist. She has done nothing wrong." "That is not for you to decide," the Inquisitor replied calmly. "Her use of rare plants, her home remedies, her unapproved charms, all could be misinterpreted." "Misinterpreted by whom?" Matteo demanded before he could stop himself. The Inquisitor's eyes sharpened. "By God-fearing people concerned for their souls." Matteo swallowed his anger. "Why show this to me?" The Inquisitor stepped close enough that Matteo could smell the faint scent of incense on his robes. "Because she trusts you. And because when she is taken, if she is taken, anything she has ever said to you will be questioned." He paused. I suggest you be careful with your memories. The message was clear. If Serafina slipped, Matteo would fall with her. A gust of cold wind blew across the bridge, snuffing out the lantern flame. Darkness swallowed the Inquisitor's face entirely. "We will speak again," the man said softly. When Matteo blinked, the Inquisitor was already walking away, absorbed by the fog until he vanished completely. Matteo stood frozen on the bridge for several minutes, gripping the parchment as if it were burning his skin. He understood the truth now. He wasn't merely noticed. He wasn't merely observed. He had been drawn into the circle, the invisible net cast over the city, where innocent people were watched for sins they never committed, and where one whisper could erase a life. Clutching the parchment, Matteo turned and ran home through the fog, his breath echoing in the empty streets. Tonight, he realized, sleep would not come. And tomorrow could be the day everything ends. Matteo did not sleep that night. He lay on his straw mattress with his hands clasped on his chest, staring at the cracked ceiling as shadows crawled like insects across the beams. The Inquisitor's words replayed again and again, twisting inside his skull until they became unbearable. On the table beside him lay the folded parchment, the list, and its presence felt like a second heartbeat in the room. Just before dawn he lit a small oil lamp. The flame flickered weakly, as if frightened of the darkness surrounding it. Matteo unfolded the parchment. The ink glimmered darkly, each name like a bruise on the page. He read them slowly. Serafina di Lume. Her name stared back at him like an accusation. His throat tightened. But she wasn't the only one he knew. Tommaso Farini, the miller who once shouted at a priest for taking too much grain. Elena Rossi, the widow who had rejected a merchant with powerful friends. Pietro the blacksmith, whose only crime was a short temper and a loud voice. None of these people were heretics. They were simply inconvenient. Matteo pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. Why had the Inquisitor shown him this? A warning? A test? A threat? Or perhaps all three? When the first pale light of morning seeped through the shutters, Matteo made his decision. He couldn't remain silent. Serafina had a right to know her life hung by a thread finer than spider silk. He hid the parchment under his belt and slipped outside. The fog blanketed the streets like a damp shroud. Few people wandered so early, only the butcher rolling his cart and a beggar curled beneath an archway. Serafina's stall in the market stood empty, as expected. She always collected herbs at dawn. Matteo hurried toward the northern gate, nodding briefly to the sleepy guard who barely noticed him. Inside the grove, the world felt softer, the quiet drip of dew, the earthy scent of wet leaves, the distant trill of waking birds. He followed the narrow path until he spotted her bent over a patch of mint, her gray hair spilling from beneath her hood. "Serafina," he whispered urgently. She turned, startled. "Matteo? You look as though you've seen a ghost." He glanced around. No one nearby. He lowered his voice. "An Inquisitor approached me last night." The color drained from her face. "What? Why?" "He said I spoke too freely yesterday. And then he gave me something." Matteo pulled out the parchment and opened it with shaking hands. Serafina read only a few lines before her lips parted in horror. When she reached her own name, she stumbled back as if struck. "No. Matteo, no. I have done nothing. Nothing." "They don't need a reason," he whispered. "Only an accusation." Her eyes glistened. "I heal people. That is all I do." "In these times, healing can be called witchcraft," Matteo said bitterly. "You must be careful. Don't talk about herbs, charms, anything that could be twisted." She let out a shaky breath. "Then I must stop helping. But if I stop, people will suffer. Children will suffer." She looked at her trembling hands. What cruelty forces a healer to abandon the sick? Before Matteo could answer, a branch snapped nearby. He froze. Serafina's voice barely rose above a breath. Hide it. He shoved the parchment under his belt just as a figure stepped between the trees. Matteo's heart pounded so hard it almost drowned out the sound of his own breath. But relief washed over him. It was only Marco, the farmer. Morning, Marco said, lifting a basket of onions. Didn't expect to see both of you out here. Matteo forced a smile. Herbs wait for no one. Marco chuckled, but then his gaze sharpened. You look unwell. Long night, Matteo muttered. Marco nodded sympathetically. Aye. With the Holy Office walking about, nobody sleeps well. Matteo felt a jolt of fear. Serafina stiffened. Marco lowered his voice. Heard something strange in the market yesterday. They say the Inquisition asked around about people spreading dangerous ideas. Matteo's pulse quickened. What kind of ideas? Oh, talk about fear. About injustice. Someone overheard a conversation and ran straight to the wrong ears. Serafina's hand found Matteo's arm, squeezing hard. And, do they know who spoke? Marco shrugged. Not sure. But the Holy Office rarely asks questions without already knowing the answers. Matteo swallowed. His vision clouded for a moment. It wasn't a warning the Inquisitor gave him. It was bait. A net cast around him, and he had walked straight into it by coming here. Marco waved a friendly goodbye and disappeared down the path, humming softly, blissfully unaware of the terror he'd just confirmed. Serafina turned to Matteo. Her voice was barely a whisper. What have you done? Matteo closed his eyes, his heart sinking like a stone. I think, he said quietly, I've already made the first mistake they were waiting for. Matteo and Serafina stood in the grove long after Marco vanished down the path. Fog pooled between the trees like pale smoke, swallowing every sound. Serafina's fingers curled around Matteo's wrist, cold and trembling. They will come for me, she whispered. If my name is on that list, it's already decided. No, Matteo shook his head, desperate for certainty he didn't have. You'll stay quiet. Keep to yourself. We can. How? She snapped softly. If I disappear, people will talk. If I keep working, they will talk even more. And talk, she added bitterly, is enough to burn a person alive these days. Before he could answer, a distant bell tolled, slow, heavy, metallic. Not the morning bell. Not the chapel bell. The Holy Office's bell. Serafina's grip loosened. Go, she murmured. If they find us together, they will imagine a conspiracy. He hesitated, then forced himself to leave. Every step away felt like abandoning a friend to the wolves. The streets had changed. People stood frozen in their doorways as two black-cloaked inquisitors walked down the main road. Guards followed at their sides, dragging an old man with bound wrists. Matteo's breath caught. It was Father Lucenti, the soft-spoken priest who fed birds behind the chapel and blessed every child born in the southern quarter. Now he limped barefoot, head bowed, beard streaked with dirt. What did he do? Matteo whispered to a neighbor. The man didn't look away from the procession. I heard he allowed an unapproved prayer. Or misquoted a line in Massachusetts. He shrugged helplessly. Who can tell? Someone complained. Someone. Always someone. Father Lucenti lifted his swollen eyes for a brief moment, and Matteo saw a depth of confusion and terror he would never forget. The inquisitors prodded him forward until the crowd broke apart like frightened birds. Matteo hurried toward his workshop, only to stop dead. A parchment had been nailed to his door. He tore it free with shaking fingers. Matteo di Verona, summoned for questioning. Second bell tomorrow. Holy Office of Inquiry. His heart seemed to sink through the floor. A summons wasn't an arrest, but it was the doorway to ruin. Once a man crossed the threshold of the inquiry hall, he rarely returned the same, if he returned at all. Inside, Matteo bolted the door, dropping the summons beside the other cursed parchment. 2 sheets of ink and fiber, yet both carried the weight of death. He paced the room, chest tight. Flee. Impossible. The gates were watched. Hide. That alone proved guilt. Confess something. Madness. Confession only gave them threads to unravel until nothing remained. A knock made him whirl around. "Matteo?" a familiar voice asked quietly. "It's me." He opened the door a crack. Elena Rossi, her cloak dusted with flour, stood nervously on the threshold. "May I come in?" "Please." He stepped aside, and she slipped inside like a shadow. Her gaze landed immediately on the torn summons. "I feared as much," she murmured. She unwrapped a cloth she carried. Inside was a loaf of bread, or so it seemed, until she broke it open to reveal a small parchment roll. "My own summons," she said, voice shaking. "Accused of unsettling behavior. Whatever that means." Matteo sank into a chair. "Elena, your name is on the same list I saw." Her head snapped up. "You saw a list?" He hesitated, then nodded. "The Inquisitor showed it to me." "Showed it, to you?" Her eyes narrowed, fear turning to cold realization. She stepped closer. "Matteo, did he ask you to keep it? Did he tell you to speak to anyone?" "No," Matteo whispered. "He only warned me." She exhaled sharply. "That was the test. Don't you understand? If anyone approached you about fear or suspicion, the Inquisition would know who to watch next. And she pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "I walked right into it." "Elena, wait." But she was already pulling up her hood. "Forget you saw me. Forget everything I said. I have to leave." "Elena." The door closed with a soft thud that felt louder than the Inquisition's bell. Matteo stood motionless, the room spinning slowly around him. The fog outside pressed against the windows like something alive, eager to seep in and smother him. Tomorrow he would walk into the hall of inquiry. Tomorrow he would stand where Father Lucenti stood. And he understood now with absolute clarity. The Inquisition didn't uncover guilt. It manufactured it. The next morning arrived with the chill of a blade pressed against the skin. I barely slept. Every sound outside the cell sounded like footsteps coming for me, and every murmur echoed like a verdict about to be spoken. When the guard finally opened the door, his face revealed nothing, but his silence felt heavier than shackles. "Follow," he muttered. The corridor led not to the torture chamber but to a small stone room with a single long table. On the wall behind it hung a wooden crucifix, and beneath it sat 3 inquisitors. Their robes were darker than the ones I had seen before, almost black, their faces pale with the kind of calm that comes from absolute power. I understood immediately, this was not an interrogation. This was the hearing. "Your name," the central inquisitor demanded without lifting his eyes from the parchment in front of him. I said it quietly, my voice scratchy. "You stand accused of uttering blasphemies," he continued, "denying the purity of relics, questioning clerical authority, and entertaining forbidden conversations with a suspected heretic. Do you deny these charges?" My throat closed. To deny too strongly was suspicious. To admit anything was suicide. "I do not believe I am guilty," I managed. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were calm, cold, and terribly certain, like a man who had already decided the ending of my story before I even opened my mouth. "You were overheard," he said. "Witness statements have been collected. These claims align." "Who?" I asked before I could stop myself. He smiled faintly. "Names do not matter. Truth matters." But truth here was not something found, it was something crafted. Another inquisitor leaned forward. You were seen with Brother Matteo. The name hit me like a hammer. Matteo, the gentle, nervous monk from the archives, the one who used to lend me books others considered harmless curiosities. I hadn't known he'd been arrested. I hadn't even known he was suspected. He spoke highly of you, the Inquisitor said. Said he trusted you. That you asked questions. Many questions. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a burning pyre. I sensed the trap. If I defended Matteo, I implicated myself. If I condemned him, I became a liar, which was itself a sin punishable by corrective measures. The Central Inquisitor lifted a thin piece of parchment. This is a record of your words. You claim that relics can be forged. That miracles can be misinterpreted. That fear controls the weak. I felt my knees weaken. Those words were familiar, too familiar. I had said them years ago, not recently. And not publicly. Only to one person. My mind raced. Who betrayed me? Who repeated my words? And why now? But they did not give me long to think. We will grant you one opportunity, the Inquisitor said. One chance to demonstrate humility and confess your errors. Confession purifies the soul. Purifies. A beautiful word twisted into a weapon. And if I confess, I asked slowly, what will become of me? The Inquisitor folded his hands. You will be corrected. Guided. Perhaps rehabilitated. I knew what that meant. The wheel. The rack. The strappado. Weeks of agony until I either broke entirely, or silenced myself forever. And if I don't confess? Then we assume the devil has hold of your tongue, he said. And our measures will be accordingly, decisive. Death. Or something worse. My breath trembled. This room, with its quiet voices and calm faces, terrified me more than the dungeon. Torture was pain, simple, physical, brutal. But this was an invisible execution, done with words, parchment, and smiles. I began. But the door swung open. A guard stepped inside, whispered something into the Central Inquisitor's ear. His expression barely changed, but something in the air shifted, a ripple of tension running through the silent room. Very well, the Inquisitor said. Your case will be paused. Paused. Not dismissed. Not forgiven. Just placed on a shelf until someone decided my fate. You will be held for further preparation, he said. And your associations will be reviewed. They were not done with me. They were merely sharpening the knife. As the guards led me away, I heard the faint scratching of quill on parchment, adding new lines to my record. New suspicions. New shadows. By the time the heavy doors closed behind me, I understood the truth with perfect clarity. Here, inside these walls, survival was not about innocence. It was about endurance. And I did not know how much longer I could endure. They returned me not to my cell but to a narrow storage room filled with broken shelves, rotting rope, and a single wooden stool. The guards chained me to a metal ring in the wall and left without a word. Their silence frightened me more than anger ever could. Silence meant decisions were being made elsewhere. Quiet rooms. Whispered conversations. Ink drying on orders that could end my life by sunset. Hours passed. Or maybe only minutes. In places like this time melted, becoming a thick fog that wrapped around the mind. I stared at the cracks in the stone and tried to steady my breath, but my thoughts spiraled back to the same burning question. Who repeated my words? Those old doubts about relics and miracles, I had spoken them to one person only, years ago, when the world felt safer, when conversations carried no weight heavier than curiosity. The memory unfolded slowly in my mind, piece by piece, until finally the face surfaced. Brother Jonah. A scribe. Quiet. Careful. A man who lived as though his entire life was an apology for existing. He had listened to me, nodded with gentle eyes, and said nothing. I had believed his silence meant understanding. Now I wondered if it meant calculation. The door scraped open. My heart slammed against my ribs. I expected more guards, or an inquisitor ready to deliver a verdict. Instead, a single figure stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. A monk's robe. A trembling hand. Eyes darting like a bird trapped in its own panic. "Please," he whispered. "Don't make a sound. Brother Jonah." He looked thinner than I remembered, his cheeks hollowed by fear or hunger or both. His steps were hesitant, as if he feared the very stones would betray him. "I had to come," he said, wringing his hands. "I had to warn you." "Warn me?" My voice cracked. "Jonah, did you?" He flinched before I even finished the question. That was all the answer I needed. He sank onto the stool, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this. They asked me about conversations from the past. They said you had already confessed doubts. They said they knew everything. All they needed was confirmation, and I." His shoulders shook. "You confirmed it," I said quietly. He covered his face again. "I was afraid. I thought if I cooperated, they would leave me alone. But they didn't. They arrested Matteo. They searched the archives. They twisted my words. And now you." "Now I'm here," I said. "Because of your fear." The words were sharper than I intended. His head snapped up, eyes wet and desperate. "Please understand," he begged. "They said if I didn't cooperate, it meant I shared your beliefs. And then I would be next. I still might be next." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "No one is safe here, Jonah. Not even the obedient." A moment of heavy silence filled the room. Then he leaned closer until his whisper was barely a breath. "There's more. They aren't finished with you. The Inquisitor, he wants a public confession. Something dramatic. Something that proves the authority of the order. He said your case will strengthen the faith of the fearful." So that was it. I was not simply being accused, I was being prepared. Groomed for a spectacle. Jonah continued, his voice trembling. "They want you to break loudly. Publicly. They want your suffering to remind others that doubt is death." The chains around my wrists suddenly felt colder, tighter. "What do they plan to do?" I asked. Jonah looked toward the door, as if expecting an ear to be pressed against it. Then, with visible dread, he forced himself to speak the words. "The Inquisitor ordered the torturer to prepare the strappado for tomorrow." My breath vanished. The strappado, a rope tied to the wrists behind the back, then lifted until shoulders dislocate. A silent torture. No tools. No blood. Only the sound of joints tearing like parchment. Many never recovered. Some never spoke again. Jonah reached out shakily and put a hand on my arm. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I came because you deserve to know. Because I owe you that." I stared at him, at the man whose fear had dragged me into this nightmare, and who now trembled before me like a candle about to go out. "Jonah," I said quietly. "Why tell me this? Why risk coming?" He swallowed hard. "Because I think, they will turn on me too. And if they do, I want someone to remember that I tried." He stood, wiping his eyes. "I will try to help you," he whispered. "But I don't know how much I can do." He slipped out the door as silently as he had entered. And for a long moment I sat in the dim room, chained to the wall, staring at the wood he had touched. Tomorrow they would break me. Unless something, or someone, changed the course of what now felt inevitable. That night, the cell seemed smaller, darker, heavier. The stone walls pressed in on me, and the chains at my wrists clinked faintly with each restless movement. I tried to lie down, tried to rest, but sleep was impossible. Every shadow became a figure, every creak in the hallway a herald of doom. Outside, the city whispered in the fog, and in my mind, the words of the Inquisitor echoed relentlessly, "Your case will strengthen the faith of the fearful." The candle on the floor flickered, casting grotesque shapes on the wall. I stared at them, trying to imagine a way out, a path that didn't lead through the strappado, through the hall where Father Lucenti had limped, or through the public confession they demanded. But my mind kept returning to the same thought: I had no allies. No safe place. No one I could trust completely. Then, almost imperceptibly, a shadow shifted in the corner of the room. My breath caught. I wanted to call out, but a small voice whispered, "Shoo, it is only me." It was Jonah. He had returned. His eyes were red, his robe torn and dusted with soot. He moved like a man hiding from death, pressing himself flat against the wall. "I had to," he murmured. "I cannot stop thinking about you. About what is coming tomorrow. You must be ready." "Ready?" I hissed. "For what? Pain? Confession? Death?" My voice cracked with a mixture of fear and anger. "There is no preparation for that." He shook his head, his shadow flickering across the stone. "There is. Listen. You must learn to speak with caution, even when they demand the truth. You must answer in ways that satisfy their questions without giving them anything they can use against you. They cannot bend you if you bend nothing. Do you understand?" I stared at him. It sounded simple, impossible, and hollow all at once. Yet there was a spark in Jonah's eyes, desperation, yes, but also the faintest hint of hope. "And if I fail?" I whispered. "Then they will break you," he said. "But there is always a chance. The slightest hesitation, the faintest ambiguity, might save you. Watch their eyes. Watch their mouths. Say only what they expect to hear, but nothing more." I tried to imagine this. Words as armor. Silence as a shield. I shivered, thinking about how fragile it would be, how one misstep would shatter me completely. Jonah shifted closer, his breath warm against my ear. "I also brought this." From the folds of his robe, he produced a tiny slip of parchment. On it were names, dates, whispered warnings, scraps of information he had gathered from other prisoners, from whispers in corridors. It was dangerous, but it was knowledge. And knowledge, in this place, was survival. I took it with trembling hands, feeling the weight of every name. Some were already dead. Some were broken. A few might still stand. Every line reminded me of the stakes, every careless word, every gesture, every glance could condemn me or someone I cared about. Jonah sat back against the wall, eyes flickering to the small barred window above. Moonlight poured through it, dust motes dancing like tiny spirits. "I can't stay long," he whispered. "If they catch me here, they will consider it collusion. But remember this, fear is the true weapon they use. If you can control fear, even for a moment, you have power. A single moment might be enough to survive." I clenched the chains until my knuckles whitened. "And if that moment never comes?" Then Jonah smiled, faint and bitter. "Then we endure, and we watch. And sometimes, the act of enduring is all the rebellion one needs." He slipped toward the shadows and disappeared as silently as he had come. I was left alone, the candle guttering low, the city outside muffled by fog, and the inevitability of the morrow pressing like a stone against my chest. I sat there long into the night, listening to the wind sigh through the cracks in the walls, rehearsing every word I might speak, every glance I might give, every movement I might make. The chain rattled with each thought, a cruel metronome marking time until the door would open and I would step into the hall of inquiry. Sleep never came. Only the whispers. Whispers of the dead. Whispers of the accused. Whispers of those who had vanished without a trace. And above all, the whisper I could not escape: "You will be next." Dawn arrived gray and hesitant. I could hear the city beginning to stir, muffled by fog and fear. Guards arrived at my door, silent as shadows, and led me through twisting corridors I had memorized in desperation. Every step echoed against the stone, each footfall sounding louder than it should. I clutched the small slip of parchment Jonah had given me as though it were a talisman that might ward off what was coming. At the entrance to the Hall of Inquiry, I stopped. The heavy wooden doors were carved with grim angels and twisting flames. Above them, an inscription warned, "The eyes of God see all, the hands of men punish all." I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my shoulders. A guard pushed me forward. I stepped inside. The hall was vast and colder than any cell. Candles flickered along the walls, casting long, trembling shadows. At the far end, 3 inquisitors sat behind a table carved from dark oak, their robes black as night and faces pale and unreadable. Behind them, a stained glass window diffused the morning light, but it illuminated nothing. It was as if the hall itself absorbed the warmth of day. "You may stand," said the central inquisitor, his voice smooth and unyielding. "Matteo di Verona, you are accused of heresy, of speaking against the Church's sacred relics, and of consorting with known heretics. How do you plead?" My throat closed. I could see the chains of logic they had already laid out: deny and appear defiant, confess and guarantee my suffering. Every word I had ever spoken now threatened me, every memory was a weapon. I have always respected the Church," I whispered. My voice trembled. I have not acted against it." The inquisitor's eyes narrowed. "Respect is not enough. Words are deeds here. You have spoken publicly of doubts, of fears, and of others' sins. These are sufficient to bring one before this court." I felt my pulse hammering in my temples. The parchment in my hand was Jonah's. I glanced down at it: names, dates, whispered warnings. Names of people already broken, already vanished. I thought of Serafina, of Elena, of Matteo. The room seemed to shrink, the candlelight stretching into the shape of hooks and chains. "Do you admit," the inquisitor continued, "that you have conspired with heretics?" "No." My denial felt hollow, swallowed by the walls of the hall. "I have spoken only of fear. Only of truth as I see it." The second inquisitor leaned forward, his lips thin, almost imperceptibly moving as he whispered something to the central one. I caught only fragments: "Watch him, observe, words matter." I realized then that every movement I made, every gesture, every hesitation, was being scrutinized. Even the way I breathed, the way I lifted my eyes, was recorded in invisible judgment. "You speak of truth," the first inquisitor said finally. "But truth is dangerous when untempered. You understand that?" "Yes," I said, almost a whisper, barely audible, but enough. "Then tell us," he said, "what proof do you have that your words are not heresy?" I swallowed, thinking. My mind raced through every conversation I had ever had, every question, every doubt, every casual remark about relics or herbs or the failings of men. Could any of it be turned against me? Probably. I thought of Jonah's parchment again. Perhaps it was a guide. Perhaps it was hope. I have no proof, I admitted carefully. But I have lived in service of my craft, of my people, and of my city. I have healed, I have created, I have preserved knowledge. That is my truth. The inquisitor's eyes were unblinking. One of them wrote something with a quill that scratched across parchment like fingernails on wood. I realized suddenly, this was more than judgment. This was theater. Every word I spoke, every hesitation, was being recorded, ready to be repeated to the fearful masses as a lesson: doubt kills. The hall fell silent, the air thick and almost physical. I could feel their eyes on me, weighing me, breaking me. "Tomorrow," said the central inquisitor at last, "you will return for further examination. Until then, contemplate your sins, your doubts, and the company you keep." The Holy Office does not forgive lightly. Nor does it forget. I was led back to my cell, each step heavier than the last. Behind me, the doors of the Hall of Inquiry closed with a finality that seemed to echo through my bones. Inside the cell, I pressed my forehead to the cold stone wall. Tomorrow would come, and with it, the strappado. I would endure. I would survive. I had to. And yet, even as I whispered prayers I was not certain I believed, a part of me wondered, will anyone survive this? The fog outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. The city seemed silent, yet I could feel it breathing, watching, waiting. And in that silence, I realized with absolute clarity, tomorrow, the Hall of Eyes would open again, and I would step inside, a single man against the machinery of fear, where one wrong word could mean death. The night was unnaturally silent. Even the fog seemed to hesitate before the city, curling along the streets like cold fingers reaching for something unseen. I lay on the straw mattress in my cell, chains biting into my wrists, staring at the ceiling. Every shadow danced, twisted, and I imagined the Inquisitor's eyes hidden in those dark corners, waiting, always waiting. Sleep refused me, and the candle guttered low, threatening to die. I thought of Serafina. Of Elena. Of Matteo. All names etched into the parchment Jonah had risked his life to deliver. I remembered the fear in Jonah's eyes and the trembling way he had pressed the small roll into my hands. Knowledge was survival here, yet knowledge alone could not protect me. A soft knock startled me. I froze. Visitors were rare in this place, and any unexpected noise could mean a trap. Matteo, a whisper came, trembling and urgent. It is I. Jonah. He slipped inside, shadows clinging to his robe. He had returned despite the danger. My heart thudded. You shouldn't, I began, but he pressed a finger to his lips. I had to, he whispered. I could not leave you unprepared. They will come at dawn, and you must know what to expect. Every movement, every breath, every hesitation will be scrutinized. One wrong action, one word out of place, and they will break you entirely. I swallowed. I understand, I said quietly, though I feared I did not. Jonah reached into his robe again and produced another slip of parchment. This one was smaller, hastily written, nearly illegible in parts. These are names of those already broken. Those who did not survive questioning, or whose words were twisted. Learn from them. Know what to avoid. I took it, studying the faint scrawl. Some were familiar faces, others mere whispers I had heard in the market. Each name was a story of fear, betrayal, or silence enforced by pain. My hands trembled. They will test your loyalty first, Jonah continued, voice low. Questions meant to see if you will betray your conscience, your friends. They will look for hesitation, for subtle signs of defiance. Speak carefully. Give them the answers they expect, but nothing more. And if I fail? I asked. The words barely left my lips. They will break you, he said, almost softly. But even broken, some survive in secret. Endurance is a weapon. A shield. Sometimes it is all you have. The memory of the strappado tightened in my chest. The thought of my wrists lifted behind me, shoulders dislocated, and the slow, relentless pressure of pain made my knees buckle. And yet Jonah's words offered a sliver of hope. Perhaps cleverness, observation, and silence could keep me alive long enough to endure, long enough to survive the machinery of fear. He paused, glancing toward the door. I cannot stay, he said. If anyone sees me here, even once, I am finished. But remember, tomorrow, every word you speak, every motion you make, they will watch. And if you can control fear even for a single heartbeat, you may outlast them. Then he was gone, leaving the faint echo of his steps behind him. I pressed my forehead to the cold wall, staring at the chains biting into my wrists, and tried to imagine a plan, a strategy. But the fog outside pressed against the window like an intrusive hand, and the city itself seemed to hold its breath. Hours passed in darkness. I counted them by the sound of dripping water, the faint scratching of rats, the occasional clink of metal from the corridor. And as the candle guttered and finally died, I realized that dawn would bring the first test. The hall awaited. The Inquisitors waited. And I had to face them alone. Even in silence, I could feel their eyes upon me. They were everywhere, in the walls, in the shadows, in the faintest whisper of air. They were not just men in robes, they were the embodiment of fear itself, a machine that consumed hesitation and doubt. I whispered a prayer I barely believed in, asking for the smallest mercy, the faintest chance of surviving. My wrists throbbed where the chains bit, and the thought of tomorrow's strappado loomed over me like a black cloud. But I was still alive. And as long as I drew breath, I had a chance, however slim, to endure, to survive, to continue resisting the slow tyranny of fear. The city outside was silent. The fog thickened. And I waited. Tomorrow, everything would change. Dawn broke with a pale, gray light that filtered weakly through the narrow window of my cell. The city outside seemed to hold its breath. Even the fog was hesitant, curling lazily along the streets, as if it, too, feared what was about to happen. The guards arrived silently, their boots muffled by the stone floor. No words, no warning, only the cold certainty of inevitability. I was led through the winding corridors of the Inquisition's compound, each step heavier than the last, each echo of my own chains a reminder of what awaited me. The familiar walls of the Hall of Inquiry now felt alien, monstrous, transformed overnight into a theater of fear and pain. At the far end, the Inquisitors sat behind the same dark oak table, their expressions unreadable, eyes cold and calculating. They barely looked at me as I was brought forward, chains rattling faintly with each step. Behind them, the faint glow of morning through the stained glass windows threw colored shadows across the floor, fragments of light in a world otherwise consumed by shadow. "You may stand," the Central Inquisitor commanded. I obeyed, gripping the chains as tightly as I could, trying to steady my trembling hands. My voice, when I spoke, was small and cautious. "I am ready." "Ready?" the Inquisitor said, eyes narrowing. "We will see." The second Inquisitor motioned to a guard, who stepped forward carrying ropes. My stomach turned to ice as I recognized the implements, the strappado. The rope would be tied to my wrists, hands bound behind my back, then lifted until the shoulders dislocated. A slow, precise torment designed to break body and spirit alike. My knees threatened to buckle. My mind raced, imagining the pain. Yet, somewhere deep, a spark of resolve ignited. I would endure. I had no choice. "You will confess," the first Inquisitor said smoothly, "that your words were heretical. That you conspired with known heretics. That you sought to undermine the Church." I met his gaze. "I have spoken only what I believe to be true," I said. "I have acted only in service to my craft and to my people." A subtle flicker of anger passed over his face. "You will confess, or you will endure the strappado until your will is broken." The ropes were fastened around my wrists. I could feel the coarse fibers cut into my skin, already bruising. I swallowed the scream threatening to rise in my throat. "Lift him," the Inquisitor commanded. The ropes pulled taut. My arms were raised behind me. My shoulders screamed, muscles straining against the unnatural angle. Pain shot through my body, white-hot and unrelenting. My teeth clenched. I gasped for breath. Every nerve in my body seemed alight, every joint a betrayer. "Confess," the Inquisitor barked. "I cannot confess." I gasped, voice hoarse and broken, yet defiant. "I have done nothing against the Church." The guard jerked the ropes again. Agony exploded through my shoulders. My vision blurred, tears streaming unchecked down my face. The world swirled, sound and light and pain merging into one. But still, somehow, I clung to consciousness. Somehow, I resisted the temptation to speak words that were not true, even if those words might save my body. Minutes, or hours, passed. Time had no meaning. Only pain. Only the rope, only the chains, only the cold judgment of three faces that would never soften. I tried to remember Jonah's advice: observe, endure, bend nothing. The thought of Serafina, of Elena, of Matteo, each one's name a thread holding me to reality, helped. I would survive. I had to. Finally, the Inquisitor spoke, voice calm, almost impressed. You endure longer than most. Your silence is notable. But know this: endurance alone is not enough. The next stage will test not just your body, but your mind. And your soul. The ropes were loosened, my body trembling uncontrollably, arms numb and joints screaming. I stumbled to the floor, barely able to stand. Pain radiated from every muscle, every bone. Yet, beneath it, a fierce ember of defiance burned. I had survived. For now. And I realized, even in agony, that survival would require more than strength of body. It would require cunning, observation, silence, and a willingness to endure not just pain, but the machinery of fear itself. Tomorrow, the tests would continue. And I would face them, because if I did not, death would come not only to me, but perhaps to those I still sought to protect. The city outside remained silent, the fog pressing against the walls like living things. And in that silence, I understood clearly, the Inquisition did not merely punish heresy. It consumed hope. It devoured courage. And I had only just begun to learn how to survive. The day passed in a blur of pain and silence. My body ached from the strappado, shoulders bruised and wrists raw, but the Inquisitors were not done with me. By evening, I was brought once again before the Hall of Inquiry. My legs trembled as I walked, but I forced each step, forcing myself to appear composed. Fear would betray me, composure might save me. The hall was colder than before, candles flickering as if shivering in anticipation. The Inquisitors sat behind their dark oak table, faces calm but eyes sharp as blades. Behind them, the stained glass window threw muted colors across the floor, yet it offered no warmth, no comfort, only the sense of being watched. Always watched. You endured well, the Central Inquisitor began. Longer than most. Yet endurance alone does not prove innocence. We must probe deeper. Your associations must be revealed. Your thoughts examined. Your soul tested. My heart raced. I had expected this. I had feared this. And yet, fear alone would not break me, I had to remain observant, careful, calculating every word. Do you understand the gravity of your situation? The second Inquisitor asked. His eyes glinted with an almost imperceptible menace. Every word you speak, every gesture, can be used against you. One mistake, and it will be assumed that you are guilty of heresy and conspiracy. I understand, I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. I speak only truth as I know it. The third Inquisitor, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. We have received reports, whispers from the city, accounts from neighbors and merchants. You consorted with those accused of heresy. You spoke of forbidden knowledge. You questioned relics and miracles. How do you answer this? I swallowed, carefully measuring my words. I seek only understanding. I have spoken to many, but only out of curiosity and concern. I have never acted to harm the Church, nor to undermine its authority. A subtle tension passed among the Inquisitors. They scribbled on their parchments, quills scratching across the page like fingernails. I realized then that even my breathing was under scrutiny. Every pause, every hesitation, was noted. Observation is insufficient, the Central Inquisitor said finally. We require confession. Speak now. Admit your errors. Reveal your doubts. Only through confession can the soul be purified. I clenched my fists behind my back, feeling the ache in my wrists where the rope had bitten me. To confess would be to lie. To lie would save my body but destroy my conscience. I could not do it. Not yet. I cannot confess to what is not true, I said, voice quiet but firm. I have acted with honor and respect, and I will not claim otherwise. A flash of anger crossed the second inquisitor's face. Then you will endure further examination. The strappado was merely an introduction. Tomorrow, the rack awaits. And after that, he trailed off, letting the threat hang in the air. I felt the cold grip of despair, yet beneath it burned a spark of defiance. They could break my body, yes, but my mind, my choices, my words, those were mine. And as long as I could think, I could survive. The inquisitors dismissed me. I was led back to my cell, shoulders stiff, wrists throbbing, every step a battle against pain. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like living fingers, silent and relentless. The city seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the next act in this theater of fear. In the cell, I pressed my forehead to the cold stone wall and tried to plan. Observation, silence, patience. Those were my weapons. Pain alone would not break me, fear alone could be endured. I had Jonah's parchment, the knowledge of those already crushed. I had memory, wit, and stubbornness. Perhaps it was enough. Perhaps it would not be. I whispered a prayer, though the words felt hollow. And yet, even as I did, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. The Inquisition did not merely seek confession. It sought obedience. Compliance. The surrender of will. And I was determined, no matter the cost, to resist. Tomorrow would bring the rack. And I would face it. And perhaps, somehow, I would endure. Morning arrived pale and silent, a fragile light slipping through the narrow window of my cell. Every nerve in my body ached from the strappado, every joint screamed in protest. My wrists bore the cruel impressions of rope, shoulders stiff and bruised. And yet, there was no time to dwell on pain. The inquisitors had promised further examination, and I knew what awaited, the rack. They arrived without warning. 2 guards, silent as shadows, led me through the twisting corridors. Each step echoed against the stone, each footfall a drumbeat marking the inevitability of suffering. My body trembled, but my mind sharpened. Observation, patience, careful speech, Jonah's lessons ran through me like a mantra. I would endure. I had no other choice. The hall they brought me to was colder than the one for the strappado, wider, and filled with implements designed to crush flesh and wool alike. At the center stood the rack, a crude wooden frame with rollers and ropes designed to stretch the limbs until joints screamed, until tendons tore, until the body became a cage for pain itself. The inquisitors were already seated, calm and unreadable as always. Their eyes swept over me, noting every twitch, every flinch, every faltering breath. I realized then that this was more than examination, it was theater. Every movement, every reaction, would be recorded, remembered, and twisted to demonstrate the consequences of heresy. You survived the strappado, the Central Inquisitor said. Longer than most. Yet endurance alone does not suffice. Today, your soul will be tested, your body merely the vessel. I nodded, swallowing against the dryness in my throat. I understand, I said, voice quiet, steady. The second inquisitor motioned to the guards. Bind him. Ropes bit into my wrists and ankles, securing me to the rack. Every movement sent a shiver of dread up my spine. The rollers were adjusted, the ropes drawn tight. My muscles tensed in anticipation, ready for the pain that was already creeping across my nerves like fire. Confess, the first inquisitor said, voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. Speak your errors. Admit the heresies of your heart, the doubts that poison your mind. Only then will mercy be possible. I cannot confess to what is not true, I said, voice rising slightly, trembling but defiant. I have done nothing against the church. I will not lie to save myself. A subtle shadow of anger crossed the Central Inquisitor's face, but it was fleeting. He leaned back, hands folded. Then we proceed. The ropes tightened. Pain shot through my shoulders, my arms stretched beyond comfort. Tendons screamed. Muscles pulled against their natural limits. My chest heaved. My teeth clenched. And yet, through it all, I held on, not by strength, but by sheer will. Minutes stretched into eternity. Every nerve burned. Every joint threatened to give way. And still, I spoke nothing false, uttered no confession, offered no words to betray others or myself. The Inquisitors watched, silent and calculating. Each flinch, each tremor, each gasp was noted. They sought not only to punish, but to break me psychologically, to twist pain into obedience. Then a subtle change. The Central Inquisitor leaned forward, a thin smile ghosting across his face. "Remarkable," he said. "Few endure so long without yielding. Yet endurance is not proof of innocence. Tomorrow will bring another test, more subtle, more insidious. You may survive the body, but can you survive the mind?" The ropes were loosened. I fell to the floor, shaking, sweat mixing with blood from rope burns. Pain radiated through every muscle, every tendon, yet beneath it burned a spark of defiance. They had not broken me. Not yet. I was led back to my cell. My body screamed with every step, but my mind raced, planning, calculating, remembering Jonah's words. Observation, patience, silence. Every motion, every word, every hesitation counted. The fog outside pressed against the window like living fingers. The city itself seemed to watch, silent, waiting. And I realized with absolute clarity, the Inquisition did not merely punish. It consumed courage, tested resolve, twisted truth into fear. And to survive, one needed more than strength, one needed cunning, awareness, and the ability to endure. Tonight, I would rest. Or as close to rest as a body shattered by the rack could manage. Tomorrow would bring the next trial. And I would meet it. I had survived the strappado. I had endured the rack. And I would survive yet. That night, I lay on the cold straw of my cell, every muscle still screaming from the rack. My wrists throbbed, shoulders ached, and yet my mind refused to quiet. Sleep was impossible. Pain could be endured, fear could be managed. But uncertainty gnawed at the edges of my resolve. Jonah had not returned today. Perhaps he was hiding, perhaps already caught. His absence was a quiet terror I carried alongside the lingering pain in my body. The parchment he had given me lay on the floor, edges curled and worn from handling. I traced the names with trembling fingers, memorizing, planning. Knowledge was my weapon, and I had to wield it carefully. A soft rustling came from the corner of the cell. I froze. The guards were outside, as always, silent and unpredictable. But the sound came from within, a small slip of parchment had fluttered across the floor. I picked it up. The handwriting was hurried, desperate, unmistakably Jonah's. "Do not trust the Inquisitor's words. There is a way to survive, but it is narrow. Observe, speak in half-truths, bend nothing. Tomorrow's questions will be public, and they will watch reactions. Do not betray even in glance. Trust yourself, and endure." J. A bitter laugh escaped me. Trust myself. That was all I had left. Observation, patience, endurance. And yet, it was not enough. I knew the Inquisitors would not stop. The strappado, the rack, these were only the beginning. The mind could be broken as easily as the body, and tomorrow would test both. I tried to rest, curling into the straw, pressing my forehead to the cold stone, counting my breath. But the hallways seemed alive, each creak, each distant whisper, magnified into a threat. Shadows moved where there were none. The city outside, shrouded in fog, seemed to lean closer, listening, watching, waiting. And then the thought came, perhaps I was not alone in my defiance. Others endured. Others had survived. Each name on Jonah's parchment was a reminder, some broken, some hidden, some still resisting. Survival was not merely a matter of pain tolerance. It was subtle. It was cunning. It was silence. I rehearsed answers to questions I did not yet know. I imagined motions, gestures, ways to appear compliant while giving nothing. Every nuance would be watched, analyzed. Even the slightest twitch could be taken as guilt. I realized that survival would demand more than courage, it would demand calculation, anticipation, and a mind sharper than any weapon they could wield. Hours passed. Or maybe only minutes. Time had no meaning in this place. Only endurance. Only observation. Only fear transformed into a tool, sharpened against the stones and shadows. When the door finally creaked open, I flinched instinctively. A guard entered, nodding silently, and motioned me forward. My body ached with every step. My hands were raw from the rope, but my mind was alert, calculating, observing. Tomorrow's trial awaited. The Inquisitor's questions would be designed to entrap, to twist, to punish. And I would have to walk through them, word by word, gesture by gesture, heart hammering against ribs that still throbbed with pain. As I was led through the corridors, I caught a glimpse of the fog curling through the narrow streets outside. The city seemed vast and silent, yet it held secrets, whispers, eyes, silent observers. Survival depended not only on enduring the Inquisitors, but on navigating this world of shadows. Every glance, every whisper, every footstep could carry danger. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the pain, beneath the relentless scrutiny, a spark of determination flared. I had endured the strappado. I had endured the rack. I had survived thus far. And now, I would face whatever came next. The hall awaited. The Inquisitors awaited. And I would endure. Tomorrow, survival would not only be a test of body, but a test of mind. And I would not fail. The morning was pale and lifeless, the fog pressing against the city like a living thing. I was led once more through the twisting corridors of the Inquisition's compound, each step sending a jolt of pain through my aching body. My wrists were still raw, shoulders stiff, legs trembling, yet I forced myself to appear steady. Every movement, every gesture, every breath mattered. This time, the hall was larger than before. Torches flickered along the walls, their light bouncing across the stone, casting long, dancing shadows. At the far end, the three Inquisitors sat behind their dark oak table, faces pale, unreadable, but with eyes sharper than any blade. Behind them, a gallery of onlookers had gathered, priests, scribes, and a few influential townsmen. My trial would be public. My endurance would be watched, my reactions dissected, my very humanity turned into a spectacle. You have endured privately, the Central Inquisitor began, voice calm and deliberate. But the soul is tested best in the eyes of others. Today, the city will witness your examination. Today, we see whether fear or defiance resides within you. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Panic threatened, but I forced it down. Observation, patience, silence. Jonah's words echoed in my mind, trust yourself. Endure. The second Inquisitor motioned to a scribe, who stepped forward with a quill poised over parchment. Every word I spoke, every action I made, would be recorded. Twisted or not, it would become part of the record, a lesson for others, a demonstration of obedience or rebellion. Confess your heresies, the first Inquisitor commanded. Admit that you have questioned the relics, consorted with heretics, and spread doubt. Speak now, lest your body be further punished. I inhaled slowly. I have acted only with respect for the Church, I said, voice steady, careful. I have sought understanding, not harm. I have spoken with curiosity, not rebellion. I have never conspired against the faith. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Some whispered, others shifted uneasily. The inquisitors leaned forward, scrutinizing, calculating. Every pause, every hesitation, every flicker of emotion was being weighed. You speak cautiously, the central inquisitor said, lips thin. Yet words alone are not proof. Actions must also be tested. And so, you will be questioned regarding those you associate with. Your friends, your neighbors, your acquaintances. Reveal them, or endure the consequences. I clenched my fists behind my back. To reveal names would be to betray others, innocent lives would be destroyed for my survival. Yet silence could be punished more severely. My mind raced, calculating, weighing, preparing a path through this labyrinth of fear. I cannot betray those who have trusted me, I said carefully. I have spoken truthfully only of what I know. Beyond that, I cannot act as judge of others' hearts. The room fell silent. The inquisitors exchanged glances, almost imperceptibly. The scribe's quill scratched across parchment, recording my words. The gallery watched, eyes wide, hearts uncertain, some perhaps hoping for my collapse. Very well, the second inquisitor said finally. We will proceed with examination by ordeal. A guard stepped forward, carrying a tray of instruments. The strappado, the rack, and other implements were present, though not yet used. The air was thick with tension, a heavy fog of expectation and fear. I felt the cold fingers of dread brush against my spine. Pain was inevitable, yet I had survived so far. Endurance would be my shield. Observation, patience, and silence, my sword. The central inquisitor leaned forward, voice low but cutting. Remember this, every eye in this hall watches you. Every word, every flinch, every gasp will be noted. Survival depends on cunning, on patience, on the ability to endure not just the body, but the judgment of all around you. I nodded. Every muscle ached. My wrists were raw, my shoulders stiff, my body a cage of pain. Yet my mind was alert. I would not betray. I would endure. The gallery held its breath. The hall waited. And in that silence, I realized the terrifying truth of this place. The Inquisition did not merely punish heresy. It sought to consume courage, to twist truth into fear, to make endurance a spectacle. And I, chained, battered, trembling, would face it all. Tomorrow, perhaps, I would survive. The public examination continued, each moment a slow torture for both body and mind. I was brought before the inquisitors once more, chains clinking softly as I stepped forward. My wrists were still raw, my shoulders stiff and sore from the strappado and the rack, yet I forced myself to appear composed. Every twitch, every breath, every subtle movement would be scrutinized. Failure could mean death. The central inquisitor regarded me with cold eyes. Matteo di Verona, you have survived physical trials, yet your soul remains untested in the full glare of public scrutiny. Today, we will see whether fear or defiance resides deeper than flesh. I nodded slowly, forcing my jaw to remain steady. Jonah's words repeated in my mind, trust yourself. Observe. Endure. The inquisitor's assistant, a thin man with a sharp quill, stepped forward, carrying a folded parchment. He read aloud accusations of heresy, associating me with suspected heretics, and highlighting every remark I had ever made that could be interpreted as doubt or rebellion. Every word was designed to entrap, to force a confession I could not give without betraying others. I listened carefully, measuring my reactions. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, but I maintained composure. My mind raced, recalling every conversation, every word, every look, trying to navigate the intricate web of accusation laid before me. Observation would be my shield. Silence, my sword. You will answer, the central inquisitor commanded, or the consequences will be severe. I spoke, choosing each word with painstaking care. I have acted with respect and curiosity, not rebellion. I cannot confess to crimes I have not committed. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Some observers exchanged glances, others leaned forward in anticipation. Every eye in the hall was upon me, every breath observed, every gesture weighed. The inquisitor leaned back, eyes narrowing, lips tightening. "Very well," he said slowly, deliberately. "We will test your mind. The accused must demonstrate understanding of doctrine, loyalty to the church, and a willingness to recognize error. You will answer questions designed to probe your beliefs and intentions. Deceit will be punished." One by one, questions were asked. Subtle, seemingly innocuous questions. What is the purpose of doubt? What is the value of questioning? What harm is there in learning beyond what is taught? Each question was a trap, every answer capable of twisting my fate. I spoke carefully, revealing truth without admission of heresy, expressing curiosity without doubt. The second inquisitor watched my lips and hands, noting the slightest flinch. The third took careful notes, quill scratching across parchment, recording every syllable. The gallery remained tense, some on the edge of seats, others silent in morbid fascination. Hours passed. The examination became a battle of patience and cunning. My body screamed in protest, my mind strained under constant vigilance, yet I endured. The inquisitors exchanged brief glances, almost imperceptible, and finally, the central inquisitor spoke. "Remarkable," he said. "Few endure both body and mind so well. Yet endurance alone does not prove innocence. Tomorrow, the final test awaits. You may survive this day, but the soul's trial is never-ending. Remember, even silence can betray." I was led back to my cell, every movement agony, every step a reminder of the toll exacted. Yet beneath the pain and fear, a spark of defiance remained. I had survived the strappado, the rack, and public questioning. I had maintained my composure, protected my conscience, and endured. Jonah's parchment lay on the floor, a silent promise that knowledge and careful observation were weapons. I would survive the next trial, and the next, and the one after that. Each day was a battle, each question a battlefield. Tonight, the city outside pressed against the walls in fog and shadow. The Inquisition's gaze reached beyond the stone, beyond the hall, into the streets. And yet, I had endured. I had survived. And I would continue to endure. Tomorrow, the final test would come. And I would meet it. Dawn arrived pale and gray, like a veil draped over the city. I was led once more through the stone corridors, my body still aching from the previous ordeals. Each step was deliberate, every movement calculated. The chains on my wrists rattled softly with each motion, a constant reminder of the cruelty I had endured, and the vigilance I still required. The hall for today's trial was larger and colder than any before. The gallery was packed with onlookers, priests, scribes, townsfolk, all eager to witness the final reckoning. Their eyes were fixed upon me as if my every heartbeat could decide the fate of the entire city. At the far end, the three inquisitors sat behind the dark oak table, unreadable and composed, yet their gaze pierced through the crowd, through the fog, through me. The central inquisitor's voice cut through the silence. "Matteo di Verona, you have endured tests of body and mind. Today, your soul will be examined in its entirety. You will answer questions not merely to satisfy curiosity, but to demonstrate loyalty, fear, obedience, and submission. Every word, every glance, every hesitation will be scrutinized." I swallowed hard, forcing my throat to remain steady. Observation, patience, endurance, Jonah's lessons ran through me like a mantra. I would survive. I had to. The questioning began. The inquiries were subtle, designed to reveal not what I said, but what I feared. Questions about belief, loyalty, heresy, and obedience twisted through the hall like serpents. I answered carefully, revealing only what I must, guarding every nuance, controlling every tremor of my body. The gallery watched, silent and tense, each person eager to witness my collapse. A slip of paper arrived from one of the scribes, an accusatory note, linking me with heretical conversations, with forbidden texts, with whispered doubts. I studied it quietly, memorized the claims, and prepared my careful responses. I spoke truth tempered with caution, bending words to shield my conscience while placating the Inquisitor's demands. Hours passed. The questions became more intricate, more insidious. The second Inquisitor scrutinized my hands and posture, the third noted every pause, every intonation. They sought to break not only body, but mind, to make me reveal thoughts I had never spoken aloud. The room felt suffocating, every breath a challenge, every blink a potential betrayal. Then came the final ordeal, an oath. I was commanded to swear my loyalty to the Church and to confess any heretical thought. The oath was binding, dangerous. To lie would ensure immediate reprisal, to speak the truth could condemn me. My body ached, my mind raced, yet I maintained composure. I swear, I said carefully, to act in accordance with the teachings of the Church, to uphold its authority, and to refrain from speaking against its doctrines knowingly. Beyond this, I cannot confess thoughts I have not acted upon, nor betray the conscience of others. The Inquisitor's eyes narrowed, yet the central one's lips curved in a thin, deliberate smile. "Remarkable," he said. "Few endure so long without yielding completely. Your body is tested, your mind is tested, your soul, perhaps tested more subtly than you realize. But endurance is its own proof. For now, you may live. But remember, each day in this city, each moment, is a test. And failure may come at any time." I was led back to my cell, every step agonizing, yet beneath the pain and fear burned a spark of defiance. I had survived the strappado, the rack, public examination, and the final trial. I had preserved my conscience, protected those I could, and endured. Outside, the fog clung to the city, silent and pressing, as if aware of my survival. The Inquisition's gaze extended beyond the stone walls, yet I remained. I had endured. I had survived. And I would continue to endure. Tonight, I would rest, or as close to rest as a body and mind stretched to their limits could manage. Tomorrow, the city, the Inquisitors, the machinery of fear would awaken again. And I would meet it. For the first time, I allowed myself a thought that felt almost dangerous. Perhaps, against the odds, I could endure this entire nightmare. And perhaps, one day, I would live to see freedom again. That night, the cell was darker than before. The fog pressed against the windows like living fingers, and every sound in the corridors outside seemed magnified into threat. My body ached, my wrists burned, my shoulders stiffened from the repeated trials. Yet my mind remained alert, each nerve attuned to observation and survival. A soft, almost imperceptible sound made me flinch, a whispered knock at the door. My heart jumped. Guards rarely entered without command, and any surprise visitor could mean death. I pressed myself against the wall, silent, listening. The door creaked, opening just enough for a shadow to slip inside. It was Jonah. His eyes glimmered with urgency and fear. He had returned, risking everything, just as he had before. "You survived," he whispered, voice low. "Barely. They pushed you further than most endure." "I have survived thus far," I said, careful. "But how long before they find a weakness?" Jonah shook his head. "That is why I am here. You are clever, patient, enduring, but alone, even that may not be enough. There are ways to navigate their scrutiny, to survive the subtle traps of observation, of half-truths, of manipulation. I have seen it. I know it. And I can help you." I listened, every nerve alert. Hope was dangerous here, too much, and it could betray me. But the thought of an ally, a guide within this machinery of fear, was a lifeline I could not ignore. Jonah handed me another slip of parchment, smaller and more fragile than before. It contained coded advice, strategies for answering questions, ways to shield the truth without yielding, subtle gestures to mislead observers without lying outright. Each instruction was precise, measured, and fraught with peril. A single misstep could undo everything. "They will push you tomorrow," Jonah said, voice barely above a whisper. "The final public trial may seem concluded, but their games are endless. Every word, every motion, every hesitation will be watched. You must walk the line between survival and truth, and no one can do it for you." I nodded, pressing the parchment to my chest. Knowledge was a weapon, and now I had guidance to wield it with caution. "How can I trust any of it?" I asked softly. "Trust yourself," Jonah replied. "Trust what you know. Use observation. Silence. Patience. And remember, endurance is your shield. They cannot take your will unless you allow it. They can break the body, but not the mind unless you fail to protect it." For hours, we whispered in the darkness. Plans were made, scenarios rehearsed, words measured. The cell seemed smaller than ever, shadows pressing in, yet within that small space, a spark of hope flickered. I was not alone. Not entirely. Eventually, Jonah departed, slipping into the shadows as silently as he had arrived. My heart raced even after the door closed, but a strange calm settled over me. I had a guide, a strategy, and the means to endure the next trials. Survival was still uncertain, yet the path forward, however narrow, existed. I pressed my forehead to the cold wall, feeling the ache in my body but the growing resolve in my mind. Tomorrow, the Inquisition would return. Questions, scrutiny, observation, subtle threats, all designed to consume courage, to twist truth into fear. And I would face it. Yet now, armed with knowledge and guidance, I had a chance. The fog outside pressed against the city, silent and dense, but for the first time in days, I allowed myself a thought that felt almost dangerous. Perhaps, against all odds, I could endure. Perhaps, one day, I could survive not only the trials of body and mind but the machinery of fear itself. The dawn came gray and silent, shrouded in the thick, oppressive fog that had become the city's constant companion. Every step toward the hall of inquiry was agony. My body ached from the previous trials, wrists raw, shoulders stiff, legs trembling. Yet my mind, sharpened by Jonah's guidance and the constant awareness of observation, remained alert. Survival demanded it. The hall was filled once more, the gallery crowded with the curious and the fearful alike. Every eye was on me, every whisper recorded, every gesture scrutinized. The three inquisitors sat behind the dark oak table, expressions calm, but eyes piercing and calculating. They were masters of subtle intimidation, experts in bending not just the body, but the mind and will. Matteo di Verona, the central inquisitor began, voice smooth and cold, "You have endured our trials of the body and mind. Yet endurance alone is insufficient. You have demonstrated patience, courage, and cunning, but the soul must now reveal its truth. Today, your thoughts, reactions, and subtle gestures will be tested in ways most do not survive." I nodded slowly, controlling every breath. Jonah's parchment lay folded carefully in my palm, a map of the labyrinth ahead. Observation, patience, and silence were my weapons. Every word I spoke, every gesture I made, every glance would be measured. Misstep, and the consequences could be fatal. The questioning began subtly. Small, seemingly innocuous queries designed to test not what I said aloud, but what I feared, what I concealed. "What is your opinion of the heresies whispered in the market? What harm lies in questioning the clergy? How do you discern truth from falsehood?" Each question was a trap, each word a potential confession if I faltered. I answered carefully, blending truth with measured caution. I revealed curiosity, but no doubt. I spoke with respect, but not with complete submission. My hands remained steady, my voice composed, my eyes fixed, every motion controlled. Observation and preparation were my shields, endurance my sword. The second inquisitor leaned forward, studying my expressions, every subtle twitch noted, every flinch catalogued. The third scribbled, quill scratching across parchment, recording my words for posterity, and for judgment. The gallery watched, fascinated and horrified, as the machinery of fear unfolded before them. Hours passed. My body screamed in protest, but my mind remained alert. Pain was tolerable, exhaustion manageable. But the constant scrutiny was the true trial. Even silence could betray, and every word could be twisted into evidence of guilt. The inquisitors sought to break me with subtlety rather than force, using observation, insinuation, and the weight of expectation as their instruments. Finally, the central inquisitor spoke, voice low but cutting, remarkable. You endure, you reason, you survive. Few have done so with such restraint. Yet know this, survival is not proof of innocence. Every day in this city, every question, every glance, every whispered accusation is a test. And the machinery of the Inquisition never ceases. I was led back to my cell, body battered, mind sharp, yet filled with a strange, dangerous hope. I had endured the strappado, the rack, public trials, and subtle scrutiny. I had survived against the odds. I had Jonah's guidance, knowledge, and careful observation to continue. The fog outside pressed against the walls like living fingers. The city remained silent, watching. And I realized, even amidst the fear and agony, that I had begun to understand the rhythm of this place. The tests would continue, but now, armed with knowledge and strategy, I had a chance. A chance not just to endure, but perhaps, one day, to survive completely. That night, the cell felt smaller, darker, as if the very stones pressed closer, listening. My body ached from the previous day's trials, wrists raw, shoulders stiff, muscles tense from constant vigilance. The fog outside clung to the city like a living thing, pressing against the walls, and the silence was heavy, almost sentient. Yet my mind remained sharp, focused, aware of every sound, every shadow. Jonah returned, moving like a ghost through the cell door, his eyes glinting with urgency. They test the body, yes, he whispered, but the mind is the true battlefield. Tomorrow, the Inquisition will employ subtler means, observation, manipulation, insinuation. Every reaction is a weapon against you. I nodded, pressing my palms against the cold stone. I understand. I survived the physical trials, but the subtle ones are harder. One misstep and they will twist it, Jonah said sharply. One glance, one twitch, one hesitation, and they will interpret it as guilt. You must become a master of perception, controlling every motion, every expression. Survival depends on subtlety as much as endurance. He handed me a small piece of parchment, etched with instructions and reminders. Advice for maintaining composure, strategies for answering indirect questions, subtle gestures to mask fear, and ways to shield the truth without lying outright. I memorized it quickly, knowing that any hesitation or error could be fatal. Hours passed in whispered planning. We rehearsed responses, gestures, and mental exercises to control reactions. The cell seemed alive with shadows and the weight of anticipation, yet the spark of hope, fragile and dangerous, flickered. I was not alone, I had guidance. I had knowledge. I had a strategy. When Jonah slipped away into the darkness, I was left with my thoughts, my pain, and a renewed sense of determination. I pressed my forehead to the cold wall, counting breaths, rehearsing responses, anticipating the trials to come. The strappado, the rack, public questioning, I had endured them all. And now, I faced a more insidious threat, the labyrinth of fear itself. Tomorrow would bring new methods of observation, subtle insinuations, and carefully crafted traps. The Inquisition sought to break me not only with pain, but with doubt, with manipulation, with psychological games. Survival would require more than endurance. It would require cunning, precision, and unwavering focus. Yet in the silence, amidst the fog pressing against the city, I allowed myself a thought both dangerous and vital: perhaps I could endure. Perhaps, against all odds, I could navigate this labyrinth of fear. The walls seemed to close in, but my mind remained open, alert, ready. Every question, every observation, every threat would be met with calculated restraint. The body could be broken, but the mind, if guarded, remained free. I had survived thus far. I had endured what few could. And as the fog pressed against the walls, and the shadows stretched across the cell, I made a silent vow: I would survive the labyrinth of fear. I would endure the trials of mind and body. And I would live. For now, the city slept. Tomorrow, the Inquisition would awaken. And I would face it, not merely as prey, but as one determined to endure, to survive, and perhaps, one day, to reclaim freedom. The morning fog clung to the city like a living shroud, obscuring streets and alleys, hiding secrets and threats alike. Each step toward the Hall of Inquiry was a reminder that survival here required more than strength. It required vigilance, calculation, and an almost unnatural control over every expression, every movement. My body ached, bruised and stiff from the previous ordeals, but my mind was sharper than ever. The hall was crowded with observers. Eyes that were curious, fearful, or hungry for scandal followed my every motion. I could feel the weight of judgment pressing down from every direction, a silent chorus of expectation and scrutiny. The inquisitors sat at their dark oak table, faces calm, but eyes piercing and unyielding, ready to detect the slightest hesitation. Matteo di Verona, the central inquisitor, began, voice smooth, deliberate: "You have endured trials of body and mind. Yet the soul is often tested most subtly. Today, we observe not merely what you say, but how you act under scrutiny, how you navigate subtle pressures, and how your conscience withstands temptation." Jonah's instructions echoed in my mind: observe, bend nothing, conceal fear, measure every word. I had rehearsed answers, controlled gestures, and memorized strategies for handling indirect questions. Survival was a delicate dance, each step precise and deliberate. The questioning began, subtle and insidious. Queries about loyalty, curiosity, doubt, and obedience flowed like water, each designed to entrap, to reveal the slightest crack in my composure. I answered carefully, blending truth with caution, curiosity with respect. Each word was weighed, each gesture controlled, each pause deliberate. Observation became my weapon, silence my shield. The second inquisitor watched my hands, every twitch noted, every tension measured. The third observed my expressions, my posture, my breathing. Every moment was a test, every reaction a potential trap. The gallery watched in silent fascination, some hoping for collapse, others fearful of the consequences of witnessing defiance. Hours passed. My body screamed in protest, but my mind remained alert, calculating, measuring every response. Pain could be endured, fatigue could be managed. The true danger was misjudgment, the smallest lapse that could turn observation into accusation. The central inquisitor leaned forward, voice cutting through the tense silence. "Few endure so well," he said. "You have survived physical torment, public scrutiny, and subtle psychological tests. Yet remember, survival is not innocence. Every day in this city, every glance, every whispered word, every thought, is a potential test. The machinery of the Inquisition does not sleep." I was led back to my cell, body exhausted, mind sharp, and a strange, dangerous hope flickering within me. I had survived strappado, the rack, public trials, and the insidious tests of observation. I had learned their rhythm, their methods, their games. And I had endured. The fog outside pressed against the walls like living fingers, wrapping the city in a quiet menace. The Inquisition's gaze reached beyond the stone walls, beyond the hall, into the streets. And yet, I remained. I had endured. I had survived. And I would continue to endure. Tonight, I would rest, as much as a body battered by torment could. Tomorrow, the city, the inquisitors, and their silent machinery of fear would awaken again. And I would meet it, not merely as prey, but as one determined to endure, to survive, and perhaps, one day, to reclaim freedom. The dance of observation would continue. And I would not falter. That night, the cell seemed suffocating. The fog outside pressed against the narrow windows like a living thing, and every creak in the corridor sounded like a threat. My body ached, wrists still raw, shoulders stiff, muscles fatigued from the relentless trials. But my mind remained vigilant, focused on observation, strategy, and endurance. A soft scratching at the door made me freeze. My heart leapt. Guards rarely entered unbidden, and any unexpected visitor could mean death. I pressed myself against the cold wall, listening, every nerve taut. The shadow slipped through. Jonah. Matteo, he whispered, voice low and urgent, they are watching more than just you. The city itself whispers of heresy, doubt, and fear. Every merchant, every neighbor, every passerby can be a witness, or a spy. Tomorrow's test will not only be in the hall, it will be in the streets, in every interaction you have. I nodded, pressing my hands to my face. I have survived their physical trials, but this is a new danger. Observation beyond the walls. Yes, Jonah said, leaning closer. Their reach is long. Survival requires subtlety. Every word must be chosen. Every glance calculated. Every gesture controlled. Even your silence can betray you if interpreted incorrectly. He handed me another piece of parchment, covered in fine script. Strategies for maintaining composure in public, techniques for misdirection without lying, and ways to read others' intentions while concealing my own. Each instruction was a lifeline, each subtle action potentially saving or destroying me. We must also consider allies, Jonah continued. There are others who resist, hidden in plain sight. Their names are coded in this parchment. You will need them. Trust must be cautious, but sometimes, survival depends on shared knowledge. I memorized every detail, knowing that hesitation or error could be fatal. Every whisper in the fog could carry danger, every eye in the crowd could record betrayal. The city itself had become a labyrinth, its streets a web of observation and subtle threats. Survival would demand cunning as much as endurance. Hours passed in whispered planning. We rehearsed responses, gestures, and scenarios. The cell, cramped and dark, seemed to pulse with the weight of anticipation. Shadows moved where there were none, the fog outside pressed like living fingers against the stone. Yet, despite the fear, a spark of hope flared. I was not alone, I had guidance, knowledge, and the means to endure. When Jonah slipped away, I pressed my forehead to the cold wall, feeling pain radiate through every muscle but also a growing determination. Tomorrow, the Inquisition would awaken again. Questions, scrutiny, subtle insinuations, all designed to test my endurance and cunning. And I would meet it. The city whispered in the fog, silent observers lurking in the shadows, waiting for any sign of weakness. And I, battered, bruised, but unbroken, vowed silently, I would survive their observation, their trials, and their games. I would endure. The fog pressed closer, the night grew darker, yet within that darkness burned the dangerous, fragile hope that I could navigate this labyrinth of fear. That I could survive not only the Inquisitor's torment but the insidious, watchful eyes of the city itself. And perhaps, one day, I would reclaim freedom. Morning arrived shrouded in thick, gray fog, curling through the city streets like ghostly fingers. Each step toward the hall of inquiry was weighted by the aches in my body, raw wrists, stiff shoulders, and trembling legs. Yet my mind remained alert, a razor's edge honed by the lessons of endurance, observation, and careful calculation. Survival demanded it. The hall was crowded with observers. Eyes, curious, fearful, or hungry for scandal, tracked my every motion. The inquisitors sat behind their dark oak table, calm and composed, yet their gaze sliced through the crowd, penetrating every thought, every hidden gesture. Today's trial would not rely solely on pain, nor on direct questioning, but on subtler observation, testing the nuances of thought and behavior. Matteo di Verona, the central inquisitor began, voice smooth and deliberate, you have endured trials of body and mind. Yet the true test is subtle, hidden. The eyes watch, the words are measured, and the soul is weighed. Today, the city itself becomes your courtroom. Observation is the tool, endurance is the shield. Jonah's guidance echoed in my mind: control every gesture, every glance, every breath. Observation, patience, silence. Each subtle reaction could be interpreted as guilt, each careful word a line on a ledger of accusation. I had rehearsed responses, learned techniques to shield the truth, and memorized strategies for deflecting scrutiny without yielding my conscience. Questions began, indirect and insinuating. Queries about loyalty, curiosity, doctrine, and the subtleties of morality twisted through the hall like serpents. I answered carefully, revealing nothing more than necessary, speaking with respect, curiosity, and guarded honesty. Each pause, each glance, each measured inflection was deliberate, calculated to survive the scrutiny of inquisitors and onlookers alike. The second inquisitor studied my hands, noting every twitch, every tension. The third observed my posture, my breathing, my expressions. Every motion was a potential trap, every glance a test. The gallery watched silently, their breath held, waiting for a sign of collapse. Hours stretched into a slow, suffocating rhythm. My body protested, muscles burned, joints ached, yet my mind remained agile, parsing every subtle cue, anticipating the next trap. Pain could be endured, fatigue was manageable. The real danger lay in misjudgment, in allowing subtle fear to betray me in the smallest of gestures. Finally, the central inquisitor spoke, voice cutting like a blade through the thick tension. "Few endure so well," he said. "You have survived physical torment, public scrutiny, and the subtleties of observation. Yet understand this: survival is not innocence. Every day, every moment, every glance in this city is a potential test. The Inquisition's machinery never sleeps." I was led back to my cell, body battered, mind alert, with a spark of dangerous hope flickering within me. I had endured the strappado, the rack, public trials, and the insidious scrutiny of observation. I had begun to understand their rhythm, their strategies, their methods. And I had survived. The fog pressed against the walls like living fingers, wrapping the city in a quiet menace. And yet, in that oppressive silence, I felt a fragile, dangerous hope. I could navigate this labyrinth of fear. I could survive. I could endure. Tonight, the city slept under the veil of fog. Tomorrow, the inquisitors would awaken. And I would meet them, not merely as prey, but as one determined to endure, survive, and perhaps, one day, reclaim freedom. The fog pressed closer. Shadows lingered. And I remained, battered, unbroken, and prepared for whatever came next. Night pressed down on the city like a heavy, living shroud. Fog rolled through the narrow streets, curling into corners, hiding silent threats and unseen watchers. My cell was dim, the stone walls cold beneath my aching body. Wrists raw, shoulders stiff, and muscles trembling, I remained vigilant. Pain was constant, but my mind had become my strongest weapon. Observation, calculation, patience, these were my shields. A soft, almost imperceptible sound made me tense. Someone moved outside the cell. I held my breath. Shadows shifted, the door creaked, and Jonah slipped inside. His eyes glimmered with urgency, reflecting the faint torchlight. "They watch more than just you now," he whispered. "The city itself is alive with observers. Merchants, neighbors, travelers, some loyal to the church, others uncertain, all become silent judges. Each glance, each whispered word, each hesitation can be reported. Tomorrow's trials will extend beyond the hall. Survival depends on how you navigate the streets as much as the chamber." I swallowed hard, pressing my raw palms to my face. I have survived the physical trials, but this is a different danger. Observation everywhere, even in daylight. "Yes," Jonah said. "The machinery of fear reaches far. Every moment you are seen, every motion interpreted. But knowledge is power. Use it. Anticipate, calculate, conceal fear. And remember, even subtle alliances can make the difference between life and death. He handed me another slip of parchment, covered in delicate script. It contained strategies for moving through the city unseen, gestures to mislead the watchers without lying, methods for interpreting intentions of strangers, and notes on potential allies, coded, hidden, dangerous to trust but invaluable for survival. Each line of instruction was a lifeline, every subtle action could save or doom me. Hours passed as we whispered strategies and rehearsed responses. The cell felt smaller, the air thick with tension, the fog outside pressing like living fingers against the stone. Every sound was amplified, a distant footstep, a muted cough, a scraping door, and I listened, memorized, planned. Shadows moved where there were none, yet within this darkness, hope flickered. I was not alone, I had guidance, knowledge, and strategy. When Jonah departed silently, leaving me with the cold wall and my thoughts, a strange determination settled in me. Tomorrow, the city itself would test me. The Inquisitor's eyes extended far beyond their chamber. Every word, every gesture, every glance could become evidence against me. Yet in that silence, I allowed myself a dangerous thought: perhaps I could endure not only the tortures of the Inquisitors but the subtle, insidious gaze of the entire city. Perhaps I could navigate this labyrinth of observation and survive. I pressed my forehead against the cold stone, breathing deeply, muscles screaming, but mind alert. I would endure. I would survive. I would continue, step by step, breath by breath, until freedom, however distant, became a possibility. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the city in silence. Shadows lurked in every corner. And I remained, battered, unbroken, and prepared for the trials yet to come. The silent observers watched. I would not falter. The night dragged on, heavy and suffocating. My cell felt like a cage of stone and shadows, the fog outside pressing against the windows like living fingers. Pain radiated through my body, raw wrists, stiff shoulders, muscles screaming with every breath. Yet my mind, honed by endless observation and endurance, remained alert. Survival demanded vigilance, cunning, and patience. A faint scratching echoed through the corridor. My heart leapt. Guards rarely moved without purpose, and any unexpected presence could be deadly. I pressed myself against the cold stone wall, listening intently. Jonah's shadow slipped through the doorway, silent as the fog. "They are increasing their observation," he whispered, voice low and urgent. "The city itself becomes part of their machinery. Merchants, neighbors, travelers, every eye can betray you. Tomorrow, the trial will extend beyond the hall. Even the streets are dangerous." I swallowed hard. I have survived the strappado, the rack, the public trial, but this is something different. The very air I breathe could betray me. "Yes," Jonah said, eyes sharp, glinting with urgency. "Every word, every gesture, every glance must be calculated. Observation is their weapon. Your endurance is your shield. But subtle allies can tip the balance. There are others, hidden, who resist in silence. Trust carefully, trust can be deadly if misplaced." He handed me a fragile slip of parchment, covered in tiny script. Coded strategies for moving through the city undetected, subtle gestures to mislead observers, interpreting intentions, and identifying potential allies. Each line was dangerous knowledge, each movement, if misjudged, could bring death. Yet every instruction was also a lifeline. We whispered for hours, rehearsing responses, gestures, and routes. The cell seemed alive with shadows, pressing in from all sides. Every distant sound, the clatter of a footstep, the scrape of a door, became magnified. Yet hope flickered within the darkness. I was not alone. I had guidance, knowledge, and strategy. When Jonah left silently, I pressed my forehead to the cold wall, body screaming, mind alert. Tomorrow, I would face not only the Inquisitors but the eyes of the city itself. Each interaction, each glance could be a trap. Misstep would be fatal. Yet, amidst the pain and fear, a dangerous thought crept into my mind: perhaps I could endure, perhaps I could survive this labyrinth of observation. Perhaps I could navigate the machinery of fear and remain unbroken. I had survived the strappado, the rack, public scrutiny, and subtle observation. I had endured when few could. And now, standing at the edge of desperation, I vowed silently, I would continue to endure, to survive, and to live. The fog pressed closer outside, thick and unyielding. Shadows moved where there were none. The city itself seemed alive, watching. And I, battered, bruised, yet unbroken, remained, ready for whatever the dawn would bring. The edge of desperation was near, but I would not falter.